In the grandest hotel of the city, where chandeliers sparkled and the rich dined on gold-plated tables, one maid moved like a shadow. At midnight, when no one was watching, she stole leftover food from the restaurant. But when her wealthy boss secretly followed her, what he discovered that night did not just break his heart, it changed his life forever. Stay with us till the end of this story and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more life-changing tales. In the heart of the city stood a giant of glass and steel. People called it the Royal Grand. By day, its tall windows reflected the clouds. By night, it glowed like a jewel. Cars rolled up in silent lines, engines purring, doors opening to men in suits and women in long, shimmering dresses. Bellmen rushed forward, doormen smiled. The lobby floor was polished clean, you could see your face in it. Daniel Cole owned the place. To the staff, he was Sir Daniel. To the world, he was a success story in a beautiful suit. He walked into the lobby every morning with quiet steps and a steady face. The staff stood a little taller. "Good morning, sir," they said. He would nod. Sometimes he smiled. He didn't talk much. He liked to watch. Behind the golden glass, the hotel was a city of its own. Chefs in the back kitchen. Receptionists in crisp jackets. Housekeepers moved like the wind through rooms no one ever saw. Among them was Clara Williams. Clara worked in the laundry by day and cleaned the banquet hall by night. When she crossed the back corridors in her plain uniform and rubber shoes, no one watched, no one listened. She knew how to be small. She knew how to be quick. She knew how to finish a task before anyone thought to ask for it. And at night, when the guests slept and the lights dimmed, the hotel grew quiet. So quiet the hum of the fridges in the staff kitchen sounded like a distant song. That was when she moved. Not boldly, not loudly, like a shadow that knew the path. She waited until the banquet hall was empty, the last guest gone, the last glass cleared. She stood by the service door, listening. Then she slipped into the restaurant's back area. She didn't touch what was set aside. She didn't ask the chef for anything. She didn't stand in the light. She went to the tray with the leftovers. Half pans of jollof, chicken thighs that never made it out, bread rolls no one would miss. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. She took a little, not much. Enough to matter. Enough to feed hungry mouths waiting somewhere the light did not reach. She wrapped it in clean liners. She sealed it in small nylon bags. She placed them in a black tote she hid behind the mop cupboard. Then she wiped the counter twice, like she always did, and slipped out, the bag tucked close to her body. She thought no one saw her. But someone did. From the shadow of the lobby balcony, a man stood very still, one hand on the cool glass, watching the small figure move along the staff corridor. A man in a dark suit, wearing a face people admired, a face that didn't show much. The man's eyes followed the maid as she vanished into the service stairwell. Daniel did not speak. He did not call security. He did not move. He closed his eyes, just for a second, and saw a different night, another place, another time, when a gentlewoman in a cotton dress had pressed a bowl into a pair of small, shivering hands at their back door and whispered, "Eat, my dear. No one goes hungry from my house." He had been a boy then, standing behind his mother, the late Mrs. Grace Cole, whose hands smelled like soap and fresh bread, whose eyes always searched for the ones no one else could see. His father had hated it. "Grace," his father had said, his voice tight with annoyance, "we are not a charity." His mother had only smiled, tired but warm. "True wealth," she had said softly, "is not in what you keep, but in what you give." The memory slipped away. The lobby returned, the glass and the gold, the elevator humming, and down in the staff corridor a maid named Clara moved like a shadow with a secret. Daniel watched the door close behind her. He stood very still. Then he turned and walked. Not fast, not slow, but with a heaviness in his chest he could not name. Tonight he would not sleep early. Tonight he would wait. The banquet lights were out. The staff corridor seemed longer when it was late. Clara kept her head down. She knew the camera angles by feel, knew which ones were fuzzy, which corners were blind. She had never been caught. She never intended to be. Her bag was not heavy, but it felt heavier than it was. She had learned how to pack the food so it wouldn't spoil quickly. Learned to separate rice from stew. Learned to tie knots tight. Learn to move with the calm of someone who had no other choice. In the stairwell, she paused. She listened. The building breathed quietly, the big lungs of the air system keeping rich people comfortable. She went down through the service exit, past the security light that flickered. Outside, the city had a different face. It wasn't the face that smiled at weddings in ballrooms or posted pictures by the marble fountain. It was the face that lived in dark corners, in narrow roads, in rooms with too many people and too few beds. Clara pulled her scarf tighter and walked. Back in the hotel, Daniel stood in the staff control room with the night supervisor, a man who spoke too much in the daytime and not at all at night. "Run the camera feeds," Daniel said quietly. The supervisor blinked. "Sir?" "Service stairwell, rear exit." The man nodded, nervous fingers on the keyboard. Grainy footage came to life on the screen. The maid's figure slipped past, nearly invisible in the dim light. "Zoom," Daniel said. The image grew. A small face, tired eyes, a small bag close to her body. If it was precious. "Do you want me to call?" the supervisor began. "No," Daniel said. "Log this as a routine check." "Sir?" "Routine," Daniel repeated, his voice thinner than usual. When the supervisor left, Daniel kept looking at the screen. Then he turned to the window, to the city lights beyond the glass, scattered like pieces of fallen stars. He thought of his father again. Henry Cole, the man who had expanded the hotel, made it sharp and tall and profitable. A man who taught him numbers like they were laws and people like they were moving parts. Profit first, Henry used to say. Mercy later. Then Daniel thought of his mother, who had died too early, leaving behind a notebook with recipes for soup and a pressed flower between pages that smelled faintly of rain. True wealth is not in what you keep, but in what you give. Something shifted inside him, a slow turn of a key in a door he had not opened for years. He looked at the clock. He looked at the city. He picked up his car keys. "I will follow her, see what she's up to," he said softly to no one, like a man answering a question only his own heart had asked. Clara walked fast, but not too fast. She knew which streets felt safe and which did not. She kept to the edges, where the streetlights blinked like tired eyes. When she reached the bus stop, a yellow minibus rumbled up and coughed smoke. She climbed in, choosing a seat near the window. She kept her tote on her lap, one hand over the knots. From 3 cars behind, a black SUV rolled forward. The driver sat very still. The engine purred. Daniel kept a careful distance. He didn't want to be seen. He didn't want to scare her off. He had followed people before, clients, inspectors, sometimes even managers. He suspected of cutting corners. He had never followed a maid carrying leftover food. He felt foolish. He felt strange. He also felt something like fear, and he did not know why. The minibus turned off the main road onto a narrower one. The city changed clothes. The buildings wore cracked paint and iron bars. The sidewalks had more shadows than people. Somewhere a radio played an old song about missing home. The bus stopped. Clara got down. She didn't look back. Daniel parked far away and turned off his engine. He stepped out, closing the door with the gentleness of a thief. He walked, not too close, not too far, like a man crossing a river on a thread. Clara turned onto a side path, the kind of path that looks like a mistake. At the end stood a building that had once dreamed of being more than it became. The roof had patches. The windows were broken. The door hung like a tired arm. Clara knocked lightly, a rhythm that sounded like a secret password. The door scraped open. Daniel stopped in the shadows. He held his breath. He saw them before he heard them. Small shapes moving fast. The first boy ran out, bare feet slapping the concrete. A younger girl followed, hair tied in 2 small puffs. Then another boy, another girl, a small one with a runny nose and bright eyes. In a second, they were all around her, hands reaching, voices tumbling over each other. "Auntie Clara, you came. Is that food?" "I'm hungry." "No, he is hungrier." "No, I am." Clara laughed softly, a sound like a lamp turning on in a dark room. She crouched and hugged them all. The bag was still on her shoulder, but her hands were full of children now, of small shoulders, small cheeks, small lives. "Easy," she said gently. "Let me in first." Inside, the air was warm with too many breaths. The floor was swept but old. In one corner lay thin mattresses folded into stacks. In another, a wooden table held a kettle and 3 cups that didn't match. A hand-drawn chart hung on the wall. Sam, Lucy, Peter, Mary, John. Under each name, ticks in pencil, chores, school practice, kind words, night prayers. Clara set the bag on the table and opened it with careful hands. She took out rice in 2 small containers, chicken in a third. She divided the portions with a patience that felt like love measured by a spoon. "One person at a time," she said softly. "Please." They came one by one, clutching plates, trying not to smile too widely. "Me first?" "No, Peter, you went first yesterday." "Mary, wait. Ladies first." "John, say thank you." "Thank you, Aunt Clara." The smell of food filled the room, a small miracle. The children sat on the floor in a circle. They ate like it was a game and a prayer at once. Clara did not take a plate. She watched them, kneeling near the smallest boy whose hand shook when he lifted his spoon. She steadied his wrist. She wiped her chin. She smiled. From the broken window in the shadow outside, Daniel saw everything. He saw how she did not eat. He saw how she watched and waited, making sure there was joy before there was any thought of herself. He stepped back. He felt a heat behind his eyes that he had not allowed in years. He remembered a night when he had been 14 and wanted to run away from home because his father had shouted at his mother for giving a sack of rice to a family whose father had lost his job. He had packed a small bag with a toothbrush and a t-shirt. His mother had found him in the hallway, the bag in his hand, anger in his chest like fire. "Where will you go?" she'd asked gently. "Away," he had said, not knowing what that meant. "If he can speak to you like that." She had touched his face. "Daniel, don't run from hardness. Bring softness to it." "How?" he'd said. "By being the softness," she had answered. He had not understood then. He thought softness was weakness. He became sharp. He became strong. He built a hotel with corners you could cut your hand on. He kept his heart like a private room no one could check into. Now, in the shadow outside a broken building, watching a maid he barely knew refuse food so 5 hungry children could eat, he understood a little more. Softness, he saw, could be a kind of strength that did not shout, a kind that lifted other people and forgot to count the cost. He closed his eyes. He breathed out. He whispered to the night, not sure who was listening. "Thank you," he said, and wasn't sure whether he meant it for his mother, for Clara, or for something older than both. When the children had finished, Clara gathered the plates and washed them in a small plastic bowl with water she had boiled earlier and left to cool. She set the plates to drain by the window. The smallest boy tugged at her skirt. "Story?" he asked, eyes bright. "Just a short one," she said. They sat in a circle on the old rug. She told them about a bird that built a nest in a storm and how the wind tried to steal it but couldn't, because the bird used not just twigs but hope. As she spoke, the children leaned in, breathing as one. When she said the word hope, the smallest boy repeated it under his breath like it was candy. Outside, Daniel stayed where he was, unwilling to break the spell he did not understand, like a man who had wandered into a church he never meant to enter and found that silence had a shape. When the story ended, the children yawned like flowers closing. Clara tucked them in, 2 to a mattress, 1 curled small between. She checked their foreheads with the back of her hand. She adjusted a blanket. She turned off the single bulb and left the door half open. Only then did she sit on the floor by the window, back against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. Daniel almost turned away. Then he saw it. Her hands. They were shaking. Not with fear, with exhaustion. He took a step forward without meaning to, then stopped, remembering he did not belong to this room, to this night, to this kind of goodness. Clara opened her eyes and looked at the names on the chart. She traced the letters with her finger. "Sam," she whispered, "you must stop stealing Lucy's pencil." "Lucy," she said softly, "tomorrow we will fix your hair better." "Peter, you will read the 2nd page. Mary, we will find you shoes." "John," her voice broke, "John, you will not cough like this again, I promise." Promises are heavy. She lifted them anyway. She reached for her bag. She checked it once more. A small bread roll remained. She smiled. She broke it in two. She ate half slowly, thinking no one saw. She wrapped the other half again and tucked it into a plastic bag for the morning, for a child who would say the word hope like it was breakfast. Outside, Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. It fogged in the cool air and faded. He stepped back into the shadows and walked away. He did not sleep that night. He lay in his penthouse under a ceiling that had never looked so white and so far away. He saw his mother's hands. He saw Clara's hands. He saw 5 small mouths and a bread roll broken in silence. He turned on his side. He turned on his other side. He watched the clock climb toward morning like a man who had made a choice and was waiting to see it clearly. Morning came like it always did, but it felt different. Clara woke the children early. She warmed water. She washed faces and necks with a soft cloth. She brushed her teeth with tiny brushes she had bought in a market stall, proud of the colors even though they were cheap. She braided Lucy's hair again. She made sure Sam's shirt had all its buttons. She kissed Mary's forehead where a small scar drew a pale line. She lifted John, who coughed, and hummed until the cough calmed. At the hotel, the lobby staff practiced their smiles in the mirror. The breakfast buffet was arranged like a parade. The coffee was dark and kind to no one who spilled it. Daniel stood by his office window and looked down at the city. He did not see cars or people. He saw a chart with 5 names written in pencil. He called HR. They entered, a man and a woman who had learned to read his silence. "Sir, sit," he said. He spoke quietly, effective immediately. Raise the base pay for all junior staff, cleaning, laundry, kitchen helpers, and night porters. Everything below level 3. They blinked. "Sir, budgets. Rebalance them," he said. "Remove the nonsense line items we never needed." They shifted in their seats. "And," he said, "every shift must have food allocated for staff. Good food, not scraps." The HR manager hesitated. "Sir, about waste policies." Daniel turned his head slowly. "Good food," he repeated, "not scraps." They nodded like people in church. When they left, he sat alone. He wanted coffee. He poured tea instead. The steam rose in gentle spins. He remembered his mother's kitchen, smaller than any hotel pantry, full of noise and smell and warmth. He had once told her he would build her a kitchen as big as a ballroom. She had laughed and said, "1 pot, my son. If it is full, it is enough." He drank the tea. It did not taste like power. It tasted like a door opening. Clara moved through the banquet hall like a quiet song. She wiped the last table and stacked the chairs. She kept her eyes on her hands. She did not steal today, not because she did not want to, because she was afraid. Last night had been too smooth. Good nights make future risks feel larger. She would try to ask next time. She had tried to ask before. No one listened. Words felt more dangerous than hands. "Clara," a voice said. She turned. The head chef stood there, his face somewhere between stern and thoughtful. "The boss wants to see you," he said. Her mouth went dry. "Sir Daniel?" He nodded. His office. Now. Her heart did a small wrong thing in her chest, like a bird hitting a window. She wiped her palms on her apron and walked toward the elevator. The ride up felt like a climb into the sky. When the doors opened, the carpet was softer. The air smelled like quiet. Daniel's assistant looked up. "Go in," she said gently, and there was something in her tone that made Clara feel both seen and very small. Clara stepped into the office. The windows were grand. The city looked like a painting. Daniel stood beside his desk, sleeves pushed back, eyes steady. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir," Clara whispered. "Please," he said, gesturing. "Sit." She sat on the edge of the chair. Her hands sat in her lap. He did not speak at once. He looked at her like a man reading a page he didn't want to damage with his fingers. "Clara," he said finally, and her name in his voice sounded gentler than she expected. "Last night I followed you." She went cold. Her fingers clenched against each other. She stared at the floor. "I saw you take—" He paused and changed the word. "I saw you carry food. I saw where you went. I saw the children." Silence spread wide between them. She swallowed. I'm sorry, sir, she said, and her voice broke on the last word. I know it is wrong to take. I know the rules. I tried to ask before. I did. Her throat closed. They were hungry. I can't watch them sleep on empty stomachs and say I followed rules. A tear fell on her wrist. She looked frightened of her own tear, as if it might betray her further. Daniel shook his head. You did not do wrong. Besides, it's just leftover food, he said quietly. She looked up, confused. You fed children, he said, as if that explained everything. Not mine, she whispered, as if that made it worse. I found them. One by the market, one near the bus park, one sitting by a rubbish heap holding a broken shoe, like it could turn into bread if he wished hard enough. She took a breath. I couldn't leave them. I told myself I'd find a place for them. But the places were full. The forms were long. People wanted proof, time, and money. I had none of those. You gave what you had, he said. Not enough, she said, shaking her head. Never enough. For a moment, the office disappeared. Daniel was a boy again in a kitchen that smelled like onions and a night breeze, watching his mother fold bread into a cloth for someone who didn't ask for it. Clara, he said. I won't punish you. She stared at him like he had spoken in a language she did not know. I won't, he repeated. There will be no suspension, no warning letter. He took a breath. I am grateful you showed me something I needed to see. Her hand flew to her mouth. A small sound escaped, not quite a sob. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded. Then he did something he had never done. He said the words without a plan fully formed. I want to help, he said. She sat very still, not trusting the shape of hope. How? She asked, cautious, like a person reaching toward light and expecting it to burn. He has not answered yet. He looked out at the city and saw 5 names written in pencil. He turned back. First, he said, you will not need to hide food. From today, the hotel will provide proper meals for staff on each shift. If there is extra, it will be organized, not stolen. You will not have to steal what you intend to give. Her shoulders dropped a little, as if a weight had moved. Second, he continued, we will find a better place for the children to live, a safe place, clean beds, water, light. She stared, trying to see if this was one of those dreams that looked like the world, but felt warmer. Third, he said softly, I would like to see them, if you allow me. That was when she broke, not with sound, with relief, with a quiet that hurt. She nodded once, twice, quickly, like a person learning to breathe again. Thank you, she said, afraid of saying more, because more would fall out of her eyes and onto her hands. Daniel looked at her and understood that there are moments when power should kneel, even if only in the heart. After your shift, he said, we'll go together. She nodded. When she left the office, she pressed her back against the corridor wall and closed her eyes. She whispered a prayer she had used so often it felt like a song with only 2 words. Thank you. Inside, Daniel stood alone, his mother's voice alive in a room that had never held her. True wealth is not in what you keep, but in what you give. He said the words aloud, softly, to make them real. The evening air was heavy with dust and the smell of roasted corn from a roadside stall. Clara walked fast, her steps nervous. She wasn't alone this time. Beside her walked Daniel, in a simple shirt without his suit jacket, looking like any other man on the street. Except he wasn't. She clutched her tote bag tighter, her eyes low. She kept thinking, what if they laugh? What if he regrets this? When they turned into the narrow path, the children's laughter floated through the broken window of the orphan home. Clara's heart jumped. She stopped. Sir, please, don't judge them by the place, she said quickly. They're good children, they just... Her words stuck in her throat. Daniel's voice was calm. Clara. I'm here to see them, that's all. She nodded, breathing slowly, and pushed the door open. Inside, 5 small faces turned, surprised. Then in a heartbeat, they ran to her. Mama Clara, you're back. Is there food? Daniel stood at the doorway, watching. He had stood in many rooms filled with laughter, but none felt this alive. Clara bent down, hugging each child. Then she straightened and said softly, This is Mr. Daniel. He's my boss." The children stared. Sam, the eldest at 10, stepped forward bravely. "Good evening, sir." His voice was small but steady. Daniel smiled, bending slightly to meet his eyes. "Good evening, Sam." The others followed. Lucy curtsied shyly. Peter waved. Mary hid behind Clara's skirt. Little John coughed and clung to her hand. Daniel's heart tightened at the sound of the cough, but he only nodded gently. "I'm glad to meet you all." After the children ate, Clara told them to sit quietly. She wanted them to behave well, to show respect. Daniel sat on an old wooden chair. Clara stood, twisting her hands. "I didn't plan for this life," she began softly. "I came to the city to work. I thought I would save some money. I thought maybe one day I would go back to my village with something in my hands." Her eyes moved to the children. "But then I saw them, one by one. Sam was at the market. He had not eaten for 2 days. Lucy was on the roadside crying after her mother never came back. Peter was sitting by a dustbin, holding a bottle as if it were a treasure. Mary was abandoned near the bus stop, wrapped in a cloth. John was a baby left at the church steps. I couldn't walk past them. I couldn't." Her voice shook. "I took them. I told myself I'd just help for a while, but then I couldn't let go." The children listened quietly. Daniel watched her, the strength in her breaking voice, the tiredness in her eyes. He had seen people manage empires with less courage. "You gave them a family," he said softly. She shook her head. "I only gave them scraps." Daniel's voice grew firm. "No, Clara. You gave them love." That night, as Daniel drove back, he couldn't stop thinking about the little cough in John's chest, the cracked wall behind Lucy's bed, the way Clara had divided food like a soldier rationing life. At the hotel, he called his lawyer. "I need papers drawn up tomorrow," he said. "What kind of papers, sir?" "Lease for a house, furnishings, and school enrollment for 5 children." The lawyer paused. "Is this for charity?" Daniel's voice was steady. "It's for family." A week later, Clara stood frozen in front of a small cream-colored house with green windows. The children bounced around her, shouting, "Auntie Clara, look! We have a gate. There's a tree in the yard." Inside there were soft beds, a real kitchen, and a table with enough chairs for everyone. The children ran from room to room, their joy spilling out like sunlight. Clara turned to Daniel, her hands trembling. "Sir, this is too much." He shook his head. "It's not enough, but it's a start." Her eyes filled with tears. "How can I thank you?" "By letting them laugh," he said simply. "That's thanks enough." Days passed. Daniel visited often, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting with the children as they did homework. Clara cooked, serving rice and beans, vegetable soup, or small fried cakes when she could. The first time they all sat at the new table together, Clara tried to step aside. "You should eat with the children, sir. I'll serve." Daniel stopped her gently. "Clara, sit." She hesitated, then sat. Together they bowed their heads, the children saying a short prayer. When she looked up, she found Daniel watching her, not with judgment but with something softer, something she couldn't name. As they ate, Peter giggled at Daniel's attempt to crack a bone the way they did. Lucy whispered, "Uncle Daniel eats like us." The table burst into laughter, warm and full. That night, Clara lay in bed listening to the children's steady breathing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was carrying the world alone. But life has sharp corners. One night, John's cough grew worse. His chest rattled, and he struggled to breathe. Clara panicked. She held him close, tears running down her face. "Please, God, please." She called Daniel. It was past midnight. He picked up on the first ring. "Clara?" Her voice shook. "It's John. He can't breathe." Minutes later, his black SUV stopped at the gate. He carried John in his arms like he was his own son. At the hospital, doctors rushed the boy in. Clara clutched her scarf, whispering prayers. Daniel stood beside her, silent, his jaw tight. After hours, the doctor came out. "He has pneumonia. We'll treat him. He'll be fine." Clara collapsed into the chair, covering her face. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't move away. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to lean, just a little, against someone else. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet prayers. Machines beeped steadily in the ward where John lay, small against the white sheets. A tube ran under his nose, carrying oxygen into his fragile chest. Clara sat beside him, her hand never leaving his small fingers. Daniel stood on the other side, tall and still, watching the boy's chest rise and fall. He had spent years building towers of glass and steel, but he had never felt as helpless as he did in that room. Clara's lips moved silently. A prayer. She hadn't prayed aloud since her own mother died years ago, but tonight the words returned to her. She whispered, "Please, Lord, please spare him. I will bear the hunger, the work, the shame, but not this. Not this child." The doctor had promised John would recover, but Clara's heart refused to rest. She had buried too many dreams to believe in promises quickly. Hours passed. Daniel left only to bring water, tea, and bread rolls, but Clara barely ate. He watched her, remembering how she had once stolen food not for herself but for these children. Now she would starve again if it meant John could wake up. By dawn, John stirred. His eyes fluttered open, glassy but alive. "Auntie Clara," he whispered weakly. Clara's tears spilled. She bent low, pressing her forehead to his. "I'm here, my love. I'm here." Daniel let out a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Something inside him softened further, the last hard shell around a heart that had learned too well how to be alone. A week later, John was discharged. At the new house, the children decorated their bed with paper stars they cut out of old newspapers. Clara helped him settle in, covering him with a soft blanket Daniel had bought. That evening, Clara stood in the kitchen, stirring soup on the new stove. Daniel leaned against the doorway, sleeves rolled up. He watched her move, tired, graceful, purposeful. "You've done this alone for too long," he said quietly. Clara glanced back. "It's what I had to do." "You don't have to anymore," Daniel replied. Her hand paused on the wooden spoon. She swallowed. "Sir, I'm grateful. More than I can ever say, but I don't want to live on anyone's pity." Daniel's voice was steady. "This isn't pity, Clara. It's respect." She turned, eyes wide, not used to hearing such words. Respect. From a man who owned a hotel where she scrubbed floors. Before she could answer, little Peter ran into the kitchen, grinning. "Uncle Daniel, come play ball with us outside." Daniel smiled, straightened, and followed the boy into the yard. For the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to lean against the counter and breathe without feeling alone. News travels faster than the truth. At the hotel, whispers began. Some staff noticed Clara leaving in a company car one morning. Others saw Daniel visiting the maid quarters more than once. Rumors bloomed. "She must have trapped him," one receptionist muttered. "A maid with the boss?" a bellboy scoffed. "She's lucky. Men like him don't look at women like us," a housekeeper whispered, half envious, half resentful. Clara heard the whispers. They clung to her like dust she couldn't shake. When she walked through the corridors, she kept her eyes low. Shame burned her cheeks. She wanted to disappear. One evening she found the courage to speak. She knocked gently on Daniel's office door. He looked up from his desk. "Clara?" Her voice was tight. "Sir, people are talking. About you. About me." Daniel leaned back, his expression unreadable. "And? They say I'm using you," Clara whispered. "That I stole more than food. That I—" Her voice cracked. Daniel stood, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of her. His voice was low but firm. "Clara, look at me." She hesitated, then lifted her eyes. "Let them talk," he said. "They don't know you. They don't know me. They don't know those children. We know the truth. That is enough." Her lips trembled. "But you could lose respect, sir." "Your reputation?" Daniel shook his head. "Clara, I've had respect for years. It never filled my heart. What fills me now is watching Sam do his homework at the new table, or Lucy sing, or John smile after being sick. That's respect enough." Tears blurred her vision. For the first time, she saw in his eyes not just kindness, but something stronger, something she was afraid to name. Days grew into weeks. The new house began to feel like home. Clara planted small flowers by the front step. The children learned to ride the bicycles Daniel had bought. Evenings were filled with the smell of food, laughter, and soft prayers before bed. Daniel came often. Sometimes with groceries, sometimes with books for the children, sometimes with nothing but his presence. He sat with them on the floor, played games, helped with math problems he had long forgotten, and listened to Clara's stories about the orphans' first days. One night after dinner, when the children had gone to bed, Clara poured tea into 2 cups. They sat on the veranda, the moonlight washing the yard in silver. Daniel sipped quietly, then said, "I never told you about my mother." Clara glanced at him. His tone was softer than usual. "She was kind," he said. "Too kind, my father thought. She gave food to strangers, money to widows, and time to everyone. He hated it, said she was weak, but He paused. "I thought she was the strongest person I've ever known. When she died, I promised myself I would be strong like my father. I built walls. I thought money would protect me. But it only made me lonely." Clara listened, her hands curled around her cup. "And then I saw you," Daniel continued, voice low, "taking scraps for children that weren't even yours, watching them eat while you stayed hungry. In that moment, I saw my mother again. I saw the strength I had forgotten." Clara's throat tightened. "Sir, I'm not strong. I was desperate, that's all." Daniel shook his head. "No, Clara. Desperation doesn't raise 5 children who aren't your own. Love does." The night grew quiet. The only sound was the crickets. Clara looked away, afraid he might see the warmth rising in her chest. The children's school held an open day weeks later. Clara dressed them neatly in uniforms. They ran about, laughing with other children, showing their books proudly. Daniel stood beside Clara, watching, his hands in his pockets. Parents glanced at them, some whispering, some smiling. As they walked home, Lucy ran ahead and shouted, "Uncle Daniel, will you always come to our school days?" Daniel smiled. "As long as you'll have me." The children cheered. Clara's eyes stung. That night, after the children slept, Daniel asked Clara to walk with him. They strolled through the small yard. The moon hung above them, quiet and whole. Daniel stopped. He faced her, his eyes steady. "Clara," he said softly, "I've watched you give everything, even when you had nothing. I've watched you turn scraps into life for 5 children, and I've watched my own heart change because of you." Clara's breath caught. "Sir," he took her hands gently. "Don't call me sir anymore. Call me Daniel." She hesitated, then whispered, "Daniel." He smiled faintly. "Clara, I don't want to help you from a distance. I want to walk beside you. I want to be part of this family. Your family. If you'll let me." Tears spilled from her eyes. "But I'm only a maid. I have nothing." Daniel shook his head firmly. "You have everything that matters. Love, strength, a heart that gives. That's what I've been searching for all my life." She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead she nodded, tears flowing freely. From the doorway, Sam's small voice broke the silence. "Auntie Clara? Uncle Daniel? Are you crying?" They turned. The children were gathered, sleepy but curious. Daniel knelt, opening his arms. "I was just asking your aunt something very important," he said gently. "I want to be part of your family, if you'll have me." Sam looked at Lucy. Lucy looked at Peter. Mary clutched John's hand. Then in a rush, they ran forward, wrapping their arms around both Daniel and Clara. "Yes!" Lucy shouted. "You can be our family!" Peter cried. John coughed, then whispered, "Uncle Daddy." Clara laughed through her tears, holding them close. Daniel's heart swelled, fuller than it had ever been. That night, the little house was filled not just with laughter, but with something deeper, a new beginning. Closing moral. Sometimes the greatest wealth is not found in tall buildings or shiny cars. It is found in the quiet love of a woman who gives, in the small arms of children who trust,
and in the heart of a man who finally learns that true strength is kindness. Clara thought she was stealing scraps, but what she gave was a feast, and in return, she found a family.